On today's episode of the Pursuit of Health podcast, we continue our conversation with Meghan Kelly, the director of the Child Life program at the Children's Hospital at Montefiore in the Bronx. On our last episode, we introduced Meghan and her work in the field of child life. On this episode, we review child life as a field still fighting to claim its true legitimacy. We discuss disparities on where and to whom child life services are offered. And then we focus on Child Life's mission to treat and heal everyone, as well as addressing implicit bias in the healthcare environment and the role that Child Life plays here. We discuss Meghan's specific philosophy of family-centered care, and she catches me at an awkward, emotional moment as she discusses one of her patients from South Africa. Along the way, with this wonderful journey of child life, we find hope. So sit back and join us now for part 2 of our discussion with Meghan Kelly of the Child Life program at the Children's Hospital at Montefiore. That's wonderful, and that's really a value-based thing. Do you see that there are areas, not just the economics, where it's kind of like arguing for legitimacy? Every time we talk about, well, can we get paid for something? Here you are, you spent decades, honing down and making the education and the whole thing a competitive, legitimate entity. And now you have to kind of find and be creative on how it gets paid for. There's always that sense, well, it's not legitimate unless it's not paid for. And that's kind of a little discouraging, but you've kind of gone beyond that, and it's wonderful. But do you find that there are areas where people just don't have access to that? There are differences in who will get access to it. And what are those areas? We've talked a little bit about that in healthcare in general. I think we've talked to you. Will you have an example, for example, of a child who may have had an experience that was based on some disparities or some sense of a bias that didn't bring in all the components that you do so naturally, and how you may have approached that instead?
Yeah, I think there's definitely disparity across the country and around the world in where there are child life services offered. And you'll see it in all the major city hospitals,
Okay.
the major cities and metropolises, have child life in every one of their hospitals. But in the smaller community hospitals, you don't see it. And in private practice, you don't see it. And you think about, those are the places that kids go the most often. You
Absolutely.
go to your pediatrician all the time. Why is there not a child life specialist at your pediatrician's office? That's where you're going for all your vaccinations and, all these sort of scary things that you don't know what's happening, and that's something that's got to be addressed, and when you look around all the different opportunities for child life to be present, we've got to not make that assessment based on money. It's got to be based on, this is the best for the patient and child and family in this setting. I think in terms of the disparity, I have to say, I'm really pleased at Montefiore. We have a great track record on a lot of levels. We have
Absolutely.
a great track record in terms of the equity of treatment of our patients. We have a very diverse population in the Bronx, and we're serving an 85% Medicaid population. So this is an underserved group of people. But there was, I mentioned to you earlier, there was recently a study published that was done during the height of the COVID surge, looking at the outcomes for COVID patients between white patients and patients of color. And there was no disparity. The outcomes were identical. And that made me feel really proud that Montefiore was not, treating their patients differently, and that everybody was getting the same level of care and was able to come through treatment successfully like that. So I thought that was amazing.
How do you think that was done? What made that happen? Because we hear the opposite so often, and we experience the opposite so often. What allowed that Montefiore and everything to break that barrier where they say that it is different and different people of color are not getting access? So what do you think Montefiore did different?
I think it's the culture of our hospital. I think it's the mission of our hospital to, heal our community. And we just don't look at things that way. We look at every single patient that comes in the door the same way, and we want them to be healed.
Right.
And I'll tell you an interesting story I heard recently. We have a family advisory committee, at the hospital. And that's a group of parents that get together and they, there's a few leadership people that are involved with this council, and
Fantastic.
They bring to us some ideas they have and some challenges they've faced. They're all parents of patients at the hospital, and, they bring forth ideas, and we have them sitting on committees around the hospital. They sit on the pain committee and the patient rights and, different kinds of committees to give their input. So one of them was sharing, we were having a conversation about equity in healthcare and about implicit bias. And this one parent shared a story about how her child, who has multiple medical challenges, used to be a patient at a Manhattan hospital. And she had this one experience, and it might sound like a very subtle thing, but for her, it changed everything about her experience at that hospital.
Right.
She went to an outpatient clinic one day and was waiting in the waiting room for her turn. And she noticed they called another woman up, and the other mother was a white mother with a white child. And when that woman went up and sat down at the registration desk with her child in the wheelchair, the receptionist was very engaged with her. Good morning, mommy. So good to see you today. Oh, look at little Johnny. He looks so big. He's getting so big. Oh, I love that blouse that you're wearing. That's really pretty. And she had this whole lovely conversation with this mother. Oh, would you mind getting out your insurance card for me so I can enter that into the system? I just need to make a quick copy. This very nice, engaging back and forth. And then, okay, mom, I have all your information. Just go sit. We'll be right with you. Just a few minutes. Okay.
Right.
And the lady went and sat down. And then it was this mother's turn. She's African-American. Her child is African-American. And she was met with the receptionist looking up to the crowd and saying, Johnson. And the mother came up and she sat down with her child, and the woman did not look up.
Wow.
And she said, insurance card.
Roll call. Yeah.
And she pushed her insurance card across the table, and the woman still kept her head down, typing away into her computer, and, got the information she needed, and then shoved the paper back across the desk to her and said, all right, go sit down. We'll call you when we're ready.
Right.
Now, that small little interaction caused her to change hospitals.
Yeah.
She decided that it had built up so much for her. This was the straw that broke the camel's back. And she said, you know what? I'm going to go to Montefiore in the Bronx, because up there's people who look like me and my son. And maybe they'll treat me a little bit differently.
Right.
Now, in thinking about this, I was talking to my staff about it. And I gave them this example because we were having a conversation about implicit bias following the George Floyd murder. And what can we do in this environment to make sure that we're not participants in implicit bias?
Right.
And I brought up that example. And one of my child life specialists said to me, well, if I was working in that clinic and I saw that, what would I do? What am I supposed to do? I'm not that registration person's boss. I can't do anything.
Right.
And I said, here's what I've talked about this with other people. And I'm always trying to grow and learn my own knowledge about implicit bias and how I can be a better anti-racist.
That's what we're talking about. Yes.
And so in thinking about it and talking with others about it, I said to this child life specialist, do you know what you could do? You could go over to that mother and replicate that lovely conversation that the other mother got with the registrar.
Right.
And say to her, hey, mommy, so nice to see you today. Look at how big Johnny's getting. He looks great. Do you have everything you need? Do you know how long you have to wait? I can go check for you if you like. Give her that same level of attention. Make her feel as important as that other mom felt.
And what she said when you told her that?
And she said, I don't know. It feels weird that I would do that. And I said, it doesn't matter that it feels weird.
Right.
It's the right thing to do. Right. Because every family should get the same greeting and the same level of empathy. And if you don't see that happening, you have to offer it to them. You offer it to them, no matter what. Yeah. The same thing as when you get on the elevator. You say hello to everybody. You greet everybody. Hi, everybody. How's everybody doing today? Anybody need any help? This is what you do when you're on the elevator in Montefiore. I don't get on and stare at the wall. I get on and I greet everybody on the elevator. That's how I approach it, Right. So I thought that was a subtle little difference to help people understand, just be nice to people. And other people will see it, and then they'll think, oh, wait, that's how I should probably be acting.
And what happens is you open the door to that. You've asked for it on a professional level. You said that's what we do when we're professional. And if you have to play that role, play that role. But hopefully, eventually, I'm sure as a a mother of your own kids and working with children all this time and educating and all this stuff you've done. Hopefully what you're saying is, I'm going to push you there on a professional level, but I hope that becomes personal eventually for you. I hope you start to embrace it. It doesn't become something you have to do artificially, because hopefully what will happen is that all those implicit biases that you have that carry on from that elevator, from that reception desk into the treatment room, into the hospital, into all aspects of the care, because that's the inroads. You play that role. As I say to my staff, who's the most important person in this group, in this practice, in this hospital? And they all look at me and they go, the patient. And I go, I know, that's the right answer. You've got that down. Fine, I give it to you. But really, right now, besides the patient, who's the most important person in this room, in this whole process? And everybody who's heard me do this before, and the new person kind of trying to not tell them, and they go, I don't know. I said, you. Every single one of you, every role you play in this network, in this team, is as important as anybody else. And therefore, if you're not up to that, if you're not presenting at the same level as everybody else is, and that means how you're approaching that child and that family, then the whole system starts to break down right from the beginning. Not just emotionally, but actually the outcome changes, because that patient experiences it differently. The child feels it, the parent feels it. And I think you're very honed in on promoting that whole family-centered, child-centered approach. Because when you don't do that, the whole building crumbles, the whole mortar falls apart that we talked about. But if you do that and you empower that family and you bring them as the center of this, I know you have some experience of this in South Africa where you've said, I saw that in action. I had the same experiences when I was there, to see the difference that you make when you don't just give it lip service, but you do it. We used to sit on the floor. Everybody was at the same level. All meetings occurred there. Nobody was above anyone else. That dynamic changed the way I talk to children, the way I care for children, the way I talk to everybody, including you. We're at the same level. Nobody's better than the other. But when it comes to patient care, you're the center of that circle that we're all sitting down. So your experience, what would you say? Because I know you've had that too, that empowering that family, because the anecdote you gave is that when you don't do that right from the beginning, you're no longer in that zone.
Right. I mean, I think it's very tricky in the United States right now because of everything that's going on in the racial climate. It's very tricky to approach this topic because we do tend to separate our personal belief system from our work. And sometimes people are uncomfortable bringing it up. And I give kudos to attending physicians like Dr. David Loeb at our hospital as the division chief for HEMOC.
Yeah, good friend.
And he has started having biweekly open Zoom meetings for his entire division to get on and talk and process about the topic of implicit bias. And this is bringing it out into the open so that it doesn't feel like it has to be a separate thing that you do at home. It's part of our professional responsibility. It's part of our code of ethics to not treat people in different ways, to be equitable in our treatment and not allow any disparities to happen. So we have to bring that conversation to the table so that we can identify what the issues are and address them. And so you mentioned earlier about family-centered care. And, that's a big buzzword in healthcare in the past couple of decades. There's a whole institute on family-centered care, and they put out all kinds of guidelines about what you should be doing to provide a family-centered care program. And I think Montefiore is doing a pretty good job of doing that in terms of doing bedside rounding and making sure the physicians and nurses are going to the bedside and incorporating the parent into conversations, incorporating the older child into conversations about their healthcare. That's a very important thing. But I think there's also room to grow in that area. And that became really evident to me when I went to South Africa and I worked in Cape Town at 4 different hospitals as a practicum supervisor for the Connect 123 practicum program.
Right.
And that brought American students and Canadian students over to South Africa for a practicum where they got to observe me acting in the role of child life specialist, teaching them about child development and play and how to engage children in distraction and stimulation for their continued growth while they're going through healthcare experiences. What I noticed there were a couple of things. One was that they really understand family-centered care. So everywhere I went there, whether I was in the day surgery area or an outpatient clinic or the burn unit, you would see signage up on the wall that would say, please be sure to, and then it would have a list of things. Ask me if I'm comfortable. Ask me if I'm having any pain. Offer me a toy or something to distract me. And it would have this whole list of things that we as child life specialists do, offering to the children. Now, in South Africa, child life is not a registered profession. Right. They don't have child life specialists. That's why they bring people like me down there to teach people about it. And the one thing that I was explaining to my students down there, and I explain this to my staff here too, is your goal as a child life specialist is to teach the child and family how to cope with this experience.
Right.
And if they can only do it when you're sitting there, you lost. You hit them. You didn't hit the mark.
Correct.
You've got to teach them how to do it on their own. And I really noticed that down there, that the parents are very involved in the healthcare. They're the ones that are carrying their children down to the treatment room, into the OR. Very common. It's not even a question. In the United States, child life often has to negotiate with the anesthesia team and the surgical team about whether or not parents are allowed to go into the OR. And, right now during COVID, for different reasons, we don't have parents going into the OR. And it's very scary for a child to have to leave the comfort of their parents' arms to be taken away by somebody they've never met before, who's got on a mask and a cap and a gown, and they can't even see their face, and go into a strange place. But if you bring the child in, if the parent carries them in and the parent has them sitting on their lap while they're getting their induction, they're feeling comfortable. They're feeling secure and supported. That's what I saw over and over down there. The parent is always involved. The parent is in every conversation. The parent is going into the treatment room. The parent is going into the operating room. And the family system is much more integrated. Siblings are there. The whole family's coming in.
Right.
And that support system is integral to the child's healing.
It's funny. You went there.
When I said that to my students, they were observing it day after day. And I'll tell you this one quick story that I was demonstrating to my student. We had to go with a 9-year-old girl who had burns over 75% of her body. There's a lot of fires in the townships down there because they use open flame for cooking and heating and light.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of fires. And she was burned over 75% of her body. She had to get a dressing change. I mean, she looked like a mummy. That's all I can describe her. Just her face was showing. She would get a dressing change every day. This is very painful. They have to pull the bandages off. They have to actually wash you and scrub you down and then rebandage you while you're standing on a metal table.
Oh my God.
So the mother was coming into the room, and then the mother looked at me and she said, I can't stay. Will you stay for me?
Oh, boy.
So first of all, that was her decision, not anybody else's decision. She said to me, it's too hard for me to stay in and watch. Will you stay for me? And I said, of course I will. So I stayed there with her, and I had my student by my side, and there were 2 nurses that were going to do this dressing change and the patient. And while I was standing there, the little girl was so engaging. She had such a great little personality. But as they started to do it, I saw her getting more and more upset, and she started crying. And the nurses were telling her, you need to stand still. We need to do this. And culturally, they're a little more stern, but also very engaging. Yeah. They were singing songs with her. They were doing the kinds of things that I would do as a child life specialist. So at one point I could see it was really painful for her.
This is the nurses themselves doing this.
The nurses themselves were being child life. Yeah. And so I happen to have a couple of stress balls in my pocket of my apron. So I took them out and I gave them to her. And I said, hold these stress balls and squeeze them like this every time it gets to be too much. Just keep squeezing them. And she said, okay. And I could see her doing it. She was squeezing and squeezing and squeezing and squeezing. And so at one point, as they were doing the washing, the nurse said to her, she had a colostomy bag. And the nurse said, I need you to hold that up for me so I can clean under it. So she had to put down the balls, right? She holds up the colostomy bag. So this 9-year-old girl, she's holding up her colostomy bag while the nurse cleans under it on her burned body. So she does that. She puts the colostomy bag back down. She's crying. The nurse reaches down, picks up the 2 stress balls, hands them to her, and says, don't forget, you got to squeeze the balls. So now the nurse is doing it, right? The nurse is doing it. She continues on with this whole thing. Next, the physiotherapist came in. She needed to do, while the bandages were off, she needed to do a range of motion test to see how high she could lift her arms. So she comes in And she had witnessed all of this that was going on between all of us. She was standing in the back of the room. She comes to the bedside and she says, looks at me and she says, may I use your balls so that I can help her do this more easily? I said, of course. So she gives her the balls and she said, here, take the balls and hold them up in the air and throw them, so she got her to do it using the balls again.
Oh my God.
And then when the whole thing was over and she was getting ready to leave, I took the balls and I gave them to her and I said, you can keep these and use them anytime that you have to come in here or anytime you're feeling stressed out or you're having to do something difficult, just squeeze these balls. You can do it yourself. And even though she had this horrible traumatic experience, she left that room with a smile on her face, feeling accomplished. We went out into the hallway. Her mother was sitting there. When her mother saw the smile on her face, her mother got a big smile on her face. And she now has a coping strategy that she can take with her all the time. And the nurses told me that every day after that, she brought the balls in for her dressing change.
Yeah.
And my student looked at me and said, wow, that was exactly what you just taught me yesterday about how it's not about me. It's about the strategy. And that strategy can be passed along through every single person interacting with that child.
Wow.
And there it was. And it worked. That's what child life is.
I think you just embodied the whole thing. That's wonderful. Actually, it's amazing. Sorry. It's pretty cool.
It's a beautiful thing to give a child back their power. When a child is in the hospital, they lose all their power. They have to get up when they're told. They get stuck when they get stuck. They eat whatever's presented to them. Right. They either can or cannot get out of bed. Sometimes they have to get out of bed when they don't want to get out of bed. Other times they can't get out of bed when they do want to get out of bed. So whatever we can do to give them a sense of mastery and control, that's what we do. And that's why we do medical play. We bring in dolls or puppets or stuffed animals, and we bring in real supplies and toy supplies. And we play doctor, and we let them be the one to give the injection. I've seen children place an actual IV, with a real needle into a doll better than some of the first-year residents because they've watched it so many times. They know exactly how to find the vein and put it in and how to wrap the tape and get it secure, and that gives them that sense of mastery and control. And then they feel more confident and empowered to get through these very, very difficult experiences.
Well, I think they changed the name of that hospital to the Ball Hospital, from what I understand, after that experience, and their balls all over the place. That just, to me, tells it all. I mean, you've taken us through a journey, really. And it's been wonderful to watch it, talk about how child life was and how it grew here at home, what the issues and concerns are, and how you've expanded it, not just at your hospital, but in the community and all the work you do in other forms, and then to reach out to another culture, another country that has so many of the same concerns and issues about disparities and stuff that we've all fought through, its own apartheid, our apartheid, all these things, and how you found that common humanity again in children. And one there thinking that you were teaching, but you were learning while you were teaching, and back and forth. And that's just the magic of child life, I think, is what it does. You saw a culture where they lived and breathed child life, didn't need to make it a separate thing because they kind of embodied it, but then you also imparted some of your stuff to them. I mean, that's just a wonderful journey. I really appreciate the chance to have shared this with you because, as I told you, we can do this for hours, you and I think that's wonderful.
I want to tell you one more thing. That,
please.
And I don't know if this will be bad for me to timestamp it like this, but today's election day.
Yes,
I'm not going to get political, but I am going to tell you that many years ago, I came to this realization that I could not be a passive observer in life. I needed to be an engaged participant, right? And at that time, I became active in a lot of different things. I do my practicum stuff. I do my work at the hospital, and executive committee for NAACP. I do a lot of things to try and be an engaged participant, right? But I thought, what can I do? I have to spend a good part of my life at the Children's Hospital Montefiore. That's where I work. That's where I am. And in case you didn't notice, or in case your audio listeners don't know, I'm a white woman. Okay. Right. So I have inherent privilege, right? So what do we do when we have this inherent privilege as white people and as white women? It's not about, trying to put a Band-Aid on something or, go to a rally and hold a sign or whatever. I do that stuff too. But what it's really about is using my power and my privilege to do what I can to give others an opportunity that they might not otherwise have. So one of the things I became committed to was starting mentorship programs at the Children's Hospital at Montefiore. And I have a couple of programs for that, for college age students in the Bronx. And one of them supports our TV system, which is an interactive system. And the other one supports our play program, where kids can get services to have somebody come by and play with them and keep their developmental stimulation going on. So I hire young people from the Bronx, which means that they are a diverse population of all races and ethnicities and socioeconomic backgrounds. And they come in to work for me. And so while they're working for me and the patients and families, what I'm doing back for them, they do get paid, they get paid a regular wage. And then I teach them about healthcare careers. So I might call you up, Eric, and say, I have a student here who's interested in becoming a doctor. Yeah. Can they come and shadow you for the day?
Absolutely.
Can they spend some time with you and find out what was your academic preparation? What kind of internships did you have to do? Whatever. Now, in healthcare, you don't have to just be a doctor or a nurse. You could be in development and fundraising. You could be in media relations. You could be in legal. You could be in IT.
So many ways to
you
do
could be in any part of the hospital doing work. So when they come in, I start with them immediately and supervising them every week and saying, think about your career goals. What would you like to do? What are you interested in? And I match them up with these people to take them on a journey of what they need to do to become a healthcare professional. And then we look to scaffold them up into jobs. And I'm famous for telling young people, take an entry-level job at a hospital. I don't care what it is. I don't care if you're cleaning the floor or you're pushing transport, patients around, whatever it is. Yeah. Get into the healthcare system, learn about all the opportunities there, have a steady, stable job with benefits. And most places will put you through school too. Montefiore will put you through school if you're in a union job. And then find your way, So we've had, one of my programs has had over 120 young people go through it. The other one's had probably about 40 or 50 people go through it. They've all gone on to careers now. So this diverse population of young people from the Bronx, many of whom thought that they were caught in this cyclical generational system of living in public housing or collecting subsidies and not knowing how to get out of that. Our country doesn't make it easy for people to get out of that. And so programs like this can help somebody get out of that. We support them while they're in school. My manager of that program, Mildred Suarez Batista, who is just an angel on earth, she helps these kids get prepared for their SATs, keep them in school, keep them moving on, teaching them life skills, how to be a professional. Can you imagine when you're 18 years old, knowing how to walk into a patient room full of doctors and nurses and say, hi, I'm just checking in to make sure everything's working okay with your TV. You got to have some gumption to do that,
Yeah.
So this is really teaching life skills as well as professional skills to these young people. That's going to bring them up, and I have commitment from upper leadership that says, someday we want all these people to be working at Montefiore in top level positions. And by the way, many of them are.
Wow.
So I'm really proud of that. And I challenge anybody listening to this or watching this to say, is there a space in my life where I can offer an opportunity to someone who's less advantaged than me and support them in their own growth, helping them to identify their own skill set, and not that I'm telling them what they should be, but giving them that venue to explore and find their way and support them in lifting themselves up.
Absolutely.
Because that's what's going to make this world a better place.
Well, and kudos and thank you for that, because you are embodying the sense that if I have privilege for whatever that is, whether deserved or not privilege, what do I do with it? I have a responsibility. It's not to hold on to it. It's to release it, to turn around and make someone else's life better. As Charles Dickens said, the world should be better because, a little bias there, but because a man has lived. In this case, because a person has lived and expanded that and made it better for everyone around them. And then Montefiore becomes not just this entity on the hill, but it becomes part of the community. It's a partnership. It's seen as something that they're all proud of. It's part of the neighborhood. It's part of the community. And that's wonderful work. Yeah. And taking child life, again, giving life to a child or child life, either way you want to do it. Wonderful discussion. And I really, really appreciate we'll hopefully have many more of these conversations. We'll see after this time, which has been a very busy year in 2020, as you said, at this election day here, and where we all see the future. But if we could see the world through your eyes, the way you have and what you've done, I think a lot of the problems can and will be solved. When you start with children, every single time there's hope. We see that. It's the beauty of why we work with children. And you just embody that, and you see it, and you live it, and you pass it on. And it's not a passive thing for you. It is a very active thing. And I think if everybody, I always tell my students and young family members, all we have to do is move forward one little bit every day. We don't have to make big steps. We don't have to take one little tiny step every day. If we did that consistently and everybody did that like you're doing and push everybody else forward, where would we be? Our life would be better. So,
and I'm going to challenge you to say, let's look at it through the child's eye.
Yeah.
Let's look at the world through the child's eye.
Oh my God, yes.
Are they seeing what we want them to see?
Yeah.
Because they're seeing it all.
Yeah.
So if we look through their eyes, if we get down on their level and we look at it through their eyes, what are they hearing?
Right.
What are they seeing? What are they feeling?
Yeah.
Look at it that way.
I always turn.
And that's when you really get to that place.
I always say to the kids in the office, if you guys were running the show, I think things would be a lot different. To say to the kids, and everybody laughs, but I'm not joking. I'm very serious about that. I think we could see that. And really, how could people learn more about Child Life? What resource would you recommend? Where can they learn more about Child Life, either at Montefiore or some resources? What would you recommend for the listener? Because I think we've given them a really good start.
Yeah, I would say, so there's a couple of things. First, I'm going to say you should go to www.childlife.org. That is the ACLP website, and it has everything from the criteria to become a child life specialist to all the different opportunities. There's a lot of interviews on there with child life specialists, a lot of resources for families and for child life specialists. So that's a great place to learn about the program in general. If they want to learn about my program, they could come on to the CHAM.org, www.cham.org, and search Child Life, and they'll come to see our program and the opportunities that we offer.
Wonderful.
I would also say that people can go to www.connect123.org to learn about the program in South Africa. They also have programs in lots of other countries around the world, about 10 other countries that they're in, offering practicum and internship opportunities. I think it's really important for Americans to get outside of America and see what it's like in other countries and understand different systems and how they work. So I think, those three sites would be the places I would say, go and explore and learn something new today.
Absolutely. When we look back at our own country, we appreciate it more, and we start to also appreciate others more. It just makes everything grow. We'll be certain to put all those links on our description of the podcast. That'll be available to everyone. And really, we finish here at the Pursuit of Health with the final question I'd like to pose to you, as we do to everyone. What is, particularly not just American, but with American-centric focus, is the pursuit of health mean to you as a child life specialist and in your career working with young people? What does the pursuit of health embody to you, and what it should be for us?
The pursuit of health for me as a child life specialist working in healthcare is really to offer equitable treatment for everyone so that there are no barriers based on race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, gender, LGBTQ, transgender. There really should be no barriers to your access to healthcare and the quality of it and the empathy that comes along with it. And the support systems that you're afforded, they should all be the same. I think it's so important for people to understand also the difference between equality and equity. I talk about this a lot with young people, that I'm trying to teach that difference, and I think sometimes people don't understand that when we say, well, everybody gets offered the same equal thing, we're not taking into consideration that equity is what makes it equal when you're starting at different places.
Right.
So, for example, in healthcare, if you don't have English as your first language, and and you come into a healthcare system that is dominated by English, and nobody can explain things to you in your heritage language, you're not getting equitable healthcare because you're not getting all the information you need to make an informed decision.
Right.
So it's very important, like we do at Montefiore, we have interpreter phones at every single bedside. We have live interpreters available 24/7. We have Skype interpreters available if you need to have a difficult conversation with somebody and you need an interpreter to make sure that they catch every single word. Yeah. So that's what we mean by equitable. Not that everybody gets access to healthcare, but everybody gets equitable access to healthcare. Right. That they're coming to the table with the same amount of information and opportunity to be part of the decision-making in their own or their children's healthcare processes across the board, regardless of where they're coming from.
Wow. That empathy and that compassion component of healthcare, and turning around and saying, hey, that's someone like me here, working here and being part of this, and how that builds that person up. Wonderful, wonderful ideas. And thank you so much for those. It's gone by quickly, as I hoped it would. And I hope others find this.
The sun is setting across my apartment.
And it's gorgeous. It's gorgeous. So thank you so much. We're going to be in touch. We hopefully do this again and this and other topics as we move forward. And we appreciate all you've done and shared with us today.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Maybe someday you come to Cape Town and we'll zoom into Cape Town when I'm there and we can do a set there. Oh my God. The bunny, curry bunny, the food there, all the wonderful cultures. What a mix to see the Malay culture. To me, that's what we share down there is, Malay to me is that whole melange of food and people and dance and music that we share in so much in common with them. It's wonderful. And I know you appreciate that too. So thank you again very much. Happy Election Day. Yes.
And we wish our nation and everyone well, and the children, because we do it for them. So thank you. I hope you enjoyed our time with Meghan Kelly. We learned about the mission of those in the field of child life to reach everyone on an even playing field, addressing barriers such as implicit bias head-on. We've learned how our team remains dedicated to leading the way in family-centered healthcare. The lessons we can all take from the Montefiore Child Life Program for our pursuit of health as individuals and a nation are clear. I look forward to having you join us for our next episode. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Fethke, and until then, I'm wishing you success in all your pursuits.